Okay. Alright, so let's check out this video by Green Dot
Autopilot
Aviation.
speed regulation, issues with the radio, and fluctuations in the voltage of the electrical generator on engine number 3 had all been noted. Two engines fall off
Apparently,
the Boeing 747
it has
just
two
moments after
engines just
takeoff from
blowing
Heathrow.
off.
The pilots fight desperately for control as their aircraft struggles to stay aloft. To make matters worse, they don't even know that their engines have literally detached from the wing. Beneath them, residents of Amsterdam watch on in horror as the stricken jumbo limps back towards the airport. Will the pilots make it, or will time run out before they can wrangle their massive jet back to the airport? This is the story of El Al Cargo Flight 1862.
I actually like.
The 4th of October 1992 began like any other day for Captain Yitzhak Fuchs, First Officer Arnon Ohad, and Flight Engineer Jadalia. As the three men relaxed and enjoyed the last few hours of a 20-hour layover in the Dutch city of Amsterdam, high above the Atlantic Ocean, a Boeing 747 was making its way east. The aircraft was arriving into Amsterdam from John F. Kennedy Airport in New York. From there, it would complete the final leg of its journey to Ben Gurion International Airport in Israel. At 59 years old, Captain Fuchs was an El Al veteran. He had amassed over 25,000 flight hours, 9,000 of which were on the 747.
Oh.
His first officer for the flight was 32-year-old Arnon Ohad.
Jesus, that is a
Ohad
shit
was
ton
much
of
less
hours,
familiar
dude.
with the 747, with
It was
just
like
over
my
600
hours on
hours
Valheim.
aircraft. The third man in the cockpit on this day would be 61-year-old flight engineer Jadalia Sofer, another veteran of the skies.
Jesus Christ.
Shortly before 4 p.m. local time, as the crew prepared to leave the hotel, their jumbo landed safely at Schiphol. Immediately, the ground crew sprung into action, readying the 747 for its scheduled departure at 6:30 p.m. This included loading more cargo, refueling the aircraft, and awaiting the crew who would complete the final leg. But along with its cargo, the aircraft had also brought with it several defects. The inbound crew had experienced a number of issues during the flight over the Atlantic.
Oh, yeah?
Problems with the autopilot speed regulation, issues with the radio, and fluctuations in the voltage of the electrical generator on engine number 3 had all been noted. None of these issues were deemed serious enough to keep the aircraft in Amsterdam, however, and the ground engineers had provisionally repaired them by the time the new pilots had arrived at the aircraft. When Captain Fuchs arrived at the aircraft, he was made aware of these issues, and he was also told that he would be carrying one solitary passenger on this evening. 23-year-old Anat Solomon was an El Al employee also based in Amsterdam. Solomon was travelling to Tel Aviv to begin a new chapter in her life. There, she planned to marry a fellow El Al work colleague in Israel. Being able to hop on one of the company's flights for free was one of the perks she'd been afforded as an employee of the airline. But in a few short minutes, this apparent perk would prove to be anything but.
Wait.
7 that evening, slightly behind schedule due to a safety reason.
Wait, she's the only passenger? So you tell me they got this
Flight
big ass plane
1862
just for
was finally
her?
ready to go.
Jesus
On
Christ.
board were more than 74,000 litres of fuel and 114 metric tons of cargo. The aircraft commenced the first few feet of its journey courtesy of the pushback tug and team as the pilots started the engines. Once the 4 engines were up and running, they completed the after-start checks, and 6 minutes later, the captain began taxiing the massive aircraft out to the runway. In a few short minutes, they would be lined up for departure. While we wait, I want to say a quick word about today's sponsor, Opera.
Oh
If
my
you're like me, you
lordy.
feel that most, even if you use
Oh.
on your regular browser, Opera's are free. So
No.
let's say there's no need for me to find the tab travel bookings, the one that doesn't hurt, but
Fully
there's no
blasted
need for
fool.
I find this really so you can see fast, and it's really hitting the maze of taxiways at Schiphol Airport. Captain Fuchs lined up on the runway. He handed control over to First Officer Ohad, who would be flying the aircraft for the 4.5-hour journey. The captain would be responsible for handling the radio calls and completing the paperwork. Or at least, that was the plan. At 21 minutes past 7, the first officer pushed the 4 powerful engines to take off thrust, and the 747 began accelerating down the runway. Before long, Ohad pulled back on his control column and lifted the plane into the evening sky. For the first few minutes, all went to plan. The powerful jumbo climbed rapidly into the sky above Amsterdam, and the pilots raised the landing gear and then raised the flaps in stages. Flight 1862 was well on its way. But just minutes after takeoff,
It's
as the
actually hot in
plane
my
reached
room.
6,500 feet, this normality was shattered. Without warning, the inboard engine on the right-hand wing violently swung off. It then slammed into engine number 4, taking it with it. Flight 1862 had literally lost 2 of its engines. A calm evening had just turned into a nightmare. Immediately, warnings blared in the cockpit. The stunned pilots tried to make sense of what had just happened. They had trained for engine failures, even double engine failures. But this was nothing like any scenario they had ever trained for in the simulator. And worst of all, they didn't even know that their engines had fallen off.
Oh, of
From the
course.
cockpit, it wasn't possible to see the engines. And there's no instrument which tells you that your engine has fallen off. The instruments naturally assume that the engines are attached. The pilots were flummoxed. Captain Fuchs took over from his colleague. He was far more experienced on the 747, and he would need to draw on every bit of his flying time to salvage this situation. As the captain tried desperately to regain control of the 747, the first officer transmitted a distress call.
Hello, 1862, mayday, mayday, we have an emergency. Hello, 1862, Roger, Quake Column 237, turn left heading 090. Turn left 090, turn 237. Hello, 1862, do you wish to return to Schiphol? Mayday, mayday, mayday. Turn right heading 260, field behind you in your...
Dude, I'm not gonna lie. It takes some level of patience and, you know, to be able to operate in these stressful situations. Like, bro, I guarantee these guys don't even get paid enough to deal with this shit, dude. Like, these guys, you gotta remember, it's not just like one guy on the radio that they're talking to. They're communicating with like fucking probably like 5 to 10 planes at one time or something like that. I think. I don't know. But yeah, that shit must suck, dude. Fuck. Like having to deal with like this guy's flight might be going good, or but this guy's flight over here might be fucking actually on fire, and like, oh man,
Distance 18 miles.
Despite the noise and multiple
I
warning
hate
bells and lights
flying, man.
illuminating the cockpit, none of the crew were aware that the 2 engines had already separated from the aircraft. However, it was self-evident by how the aircraft was handling.
Dude, and also my thing is like, bro, if you're a passenger and you expect me to believe that nobody was looking out the window when this happened, bro. If you're a passenger and you see just like a fucking engine fall off, dude, and you don't say nothing, like, yo, come on, bro.
They had lost all thrust from the 2 engines on the right-hand side. And, as it would turn out, the engines weren't the only things they had lost. Witnesses on the ground heard multiple banging sounds and saw objects falling from the sky. Incredibly, they knew more about what was going on than either the pilots or air traffic control. Back in the cockpit, Captain Fuchs struggled mightily with the controls. With all of the thrust now coming from the left-hand side of the plane, it was beginning to turn to the right. To prevent this and keep the plane flying level, the captain had to practically stand on the left rudder. As he wrestled with the plane, the other crew members were trying to figure out the extent of the damage. This was a confusing task. When the 2 engines departed the wing, they also ripped through numerous wiring looms, one of which was the wire bundle for the fire warning system. The logic of the system was that if both wires were damaged, it would trigger the fire warning in the cockpit. And on board Flight 1862, that's exactly what happened.
Roger, we have fire on engine number 3. We have fire on engine number 3.
Not only did the crew not have a fire on engine number 3, they no longer had engine number 3, or 4.
Roger, heading 270, downwind. 270, downwind.
The pilots had no idea how bad their situation truly was. According to Boeing's training manual, even with the loss of 2 engines from the same wing, the 747's huge rudder alone would be enough to keep the plane level. No ailerons would be needed. But this is not what happened on this evening. We'll see why in a moment. To correct for the immense differential in thrust, the captain had to do more than just stand on the rudder. He also had to move his control column up to 60 degrees to the left. If he let the plane bank too far, it would enter a spiral dive to the right, from which it would not be able to recover. The crippled 747 gradually turned around as the pilots got it ready for landing. Their adrenaline was surging. This emergency was like nothing they had ever trained for. That's because, when the 2 engines detached, they tore open hydraulic lines near the front of the wing. As with most aircraft, in the 747, hydraulic power is used to move the flight controls, like the ailerons, which allow the plane to bank from side to side. On Flight 1862, without enough hydraulic pressure to power the ailerons on the right-hand side, it began incredibly difficult to get them to drop, and therefore to turn the plane to the left. This was only compounded by the fact that the plane now naturally wanted to bang to the right, given that it had lost both engines on that side. In other words, the plane would now only let the pilots turn in one direction. To make matters worse, the outboard aileron here was basically dead. All it could do was float freely in the low-pressure airflow over the top of the wing. This floating aileron sticking up into the airflow caused extra drag, which only exacerbated the plane's tendency to yaw to the right. This explained why the captain was having such a hard time controlling the aircraft, and why he had to move his control column so much more than his training had prepared him to do. Sitting behind the pilots, the flight engineer had a front row seat to the true extent of the damage to the aircraft. From his banks of dials and indicators, he could see that the loss of two of the plane's hydraulic systems had crippled countless other aircraft systems beyond just the ailerons. The landing gear, the flaps, the rudder, brakes, spoilers, and engine reversers all.
Oh man, dude, I'm telling you, this is why I hate fucking flying. Like, at least when you're flying, I mean, at least when you're driving in a car, if there's shit fucked, or if you have a fire in the car, if your car isn't already blown up, you can fucking just pull over and get out, or, try to fix the problem or whatever, or just pull over, just fucking turn off the car. Point is, you can just pull over and that's it. End of story. But in a plane, dude, when you're fucking thousands of feet in the sky, it's fucking game over, bro. You're basically a dead man. You're about to die, cuz.
All relied on hydraulic pressure to operate. Each of
Like if
these.
the rudder goes out, then the brakes go, and if the brakes go, then the spoiler goes, and then the landing gear's clipped, and the fucking flapper. Oh my
Two
god.
was damaged or degraded in some way. This was an
Some
incredibly
Final
daunting
Destination shit. It's
situation.
basically like
All of these
you're
systems are
you
vital for
you are
slowing the
meant to
aircraft
die
down
here.
during its approach to the runway, and for bringing it to a stop on landing. Even if the pilots somehow did manage to get the plane lined up with the runway for a landing, and if they could manage to control it, they would have to battle with a plane that felt completely different through the controls than it normally did. This combination of failed and severely compromised control surfaces resulted in the captain having to physically wrestle the heavy and unresponsive jumbo.
He was wrestling.
Air traffic control instructed the crew to contact the approach frequency so that another controller could guide them in. The first officer went ahead and radioed the new frequency.
Triple LL 1862, we have an emergency number 3 and number 4 engine inoperative, request 27 for landing.
Runway 27 was far from an ideal choice. It was experiencing a significant tailwind.
Did they actually manage to save this plane, dude?
Ground on landing, further increasing its landing distance, as well as the forces it would experience on touchdown. The controller was surprised by the crew's intention to land on the westerly runway, but given the severity of the emergency, it was not his prerogative to question their decision.
Dude, like what? Like, what are you talking about, bro? It has nothing to do with prerogative or nothing. If you're on the radio and your job is, to direct planes and shit in and out, and like it doesn't even matter if you directed this plane or not. If you get an incoming fucking, radio transmission from a passenger plane saying, "Hey, dude, we got two engines that are out and we're about to fucking crash. We need to land now. We are landing in your airport right now. 30 seconds. Oscar Mike, Tally Ho, Tip Tip, Whisker, Hotel, Victor, Nino, Romeo, Santos, 1279er." You fucking hit the green button, dude, and you fucking let them land, my boy. Like, you don't really have a choice. It's either you let them land or that motherfucker's gonna crash into you. Like, well, what the like, can you imagine? He was just like, no. No. Like, hey, dude, we need to land. My fucking plane's about to blow up. I got two missing engines. We're landing. No. You don't have permission. Sorry, cuz. You don't have permission.
The
Been
controller
declined.
also highlighted that the flight was only 7 miles from the runway.
Bro, oh, that just got me thinking, dude. Like, the video that we just saw, chat, with the Area 51 shit. Like, bro, can you imagine being a fucking passenger plane like this and you're flying, close to, you either flying through it, around it, or above it. Basically, point is, you have to land, and the only airstrip or airbase that's around you is Area 51, dude. Can you imagine, dude? Do you think they'll let you fucking land, or do you think they'll just fucking blow you up? They're like, nah, dude, fuck you. You're gonna have to crash. You know, like, do you think they're that savage? Like, fuck. That would be pretty ruthless. I mean, I'm sure what would probably happen is like you land, and as soon as you land, there's like army trucks waiting for all the civilians to like escort them out of the base immediately. So they don't get eyes on anything.
That might sound like a lot, but for an aircraft, it's
Not
less
even
than
the
3
fucking
minutes flying
super
time.
duper ray gun
From their
alien
current position, the
technology.
crew were way too high, way too fast, and, to top it off, the runway had a tailwind. If they were going to land there, they would need to put some distance between themselves and the runway.
How many miles final? Correction, how many miles, track miles you need?
Track miles is the system pilots and controllers use to refer to the actual distance a plane will
The
fly when it's
breaking
approached
news
to
is
the runway,
unfolding.
rather than just the direct straight line distance.
We need a 12-mile final for landing. Okay, right, heading 100. Right, heading 100. Heading 100.
The controller came up with a plan. To give the crew the time and extra track miles needed to slow down, descend, and configure the aircraft for its final approach, the controller vectored the 747 onto an easterly heading. The plan was to then turn the aircraft a full 270 degrees to the right. Then
Skeptical.
it would line up with runway 27 for
Trump
landing.
ballot disqualification
The
bid
captain
gets
reduced the thrust
skeptical.
on the 2 remaining
The Supreme
engines
Court
in order to
reception.
slow the plane down. They would need to be at a fixed speed in order to land the plane safely.
Damn.
But here, they encountered their next problem. As the aircraft slowed, it required more lift to keep it in the air. To create this lift, pilots used flaps to increase the surface area of the wing. Quite simply, more wing equals more lift. But when the pilots selected the first notch of flaps, they encountered a problem which, up until this point, had remained hidden.
1862, just to be sure.
What the fuck?
Number 3 and 4 are out. Number 3 and 4 are out, and we have
Cyber
problems
attack.
with our flaps.
Without being able to use the flaps properly, the pilots wouldn't have the luxury of slowing down for landing. This was on top of the tailwind they already had, and of course, on top of the loss of both engines on the right-hand side. The odds were truly stacked against the crew as they limped their crippled jet back towards the airport. When the flight was 13 miles from the runway, the controller cleared it for a right turn to line up with runway 27.
Hello, 1862, right, heading 270, just on below, guys, right, 270.
The pilots continued their turn to the west, but without flaps to slow the plane down, their speed was way higher than normal. As a result of this, their turn was much shallower, and they ended up flying through the extended runway centerline. Their situation was fast deteriorating. Not only were they having significant problems on board the aircraft, but the flight control problems were so severe that they couldn't line up with the runway. Seeing this, air traffic control instructed them to turn further to the right in order to intercept the instrument landing system.
Dude, this is actually already starting to stress me out.
Due to your speed, continue right turn, heading 290, heading 290, 12 track miles to go, 12 track miles to go. Roger, 290.
The pilots were all too aware that their approach wasn't going to plan. Just 12 miles out now, they were tantalizingly close to the runway. But what lay ahead of them was a nearly impossible task. Still too fast and too far south of the centerline, the pilots needed to turn further to the north to get back on track.
Tower 1862, further right, heading 310, heading 310.
If they were going to land, they were now just minutes away. The safety of the airport was clearly in view. But to get there, the pilots would need to overcome some enormous obstacles, and these obstacles only became fully apparent once they started reducing their speed.
This is already not
Without
sounding
flaps
good.
to provide lift at a slower speed, the pilots needed to increase their angle of attack. Angle of attack being the angle between the wing and the oncoming airflow. The greater this angle, or in other words, the more the plane pitched up, the more lift it would create. Pitching up was the only way the pilots could fly at a low speed without using the flaps. But this pitching up had a nasty side effect.
Nasty.
All of the airflow hitting the now exposed bottom surface of the wing caused it to slow down. The captain needed to strike a perfect balance here. He needed to slow the plane down just enough that it would be able to land, but not so much that it would stop creating lift and fall out of the sky. If the only problem the pilots had was malfunctioning flaps, the solution to this predicament would be straightforward. They could simply keep the speed higher by increasing thrust on the engines. But on this day, this solution wouldn't work. Both of the remaining engines were on one side of the aircraft. If the captain tried to increase the thrust on the
Yeah, that is
engines
pretty
too much,
fucked that
they would
both
throw
of
the
them
plane
are
onto its
just,
side.
like, fucked. Yeah, that is pretty fucked. It's like fucking fate had it that they would fucking get screwed today. Like, look at that shit, dude. But like, both of the engines on one side fall off, dude. That's some fucking me type of luck, dude. Like, fuck.
Captain Fuchs knew that he would need to draw on every bit of his experience and lots of quick thinking in order to bring this plane safely down. And even that might not be enough. As the aircraft's speed reduced further to the final approach speed, the rudder and remaining ailerons had less airflow over their surface. With less airflow, they were less able to do their jobs. It was a losing battle. Flight 1862 was now just a few thousand feet above the densely populated Dutch suburbs. At its now lower speed, the ailerons and rudder were doing an increasingly poor job of countering the asymmetric thrust from the engines on the left-hand side. As the plane got slower, it pitched up. As it pitched up, the captain increased thrust on the engines to keep it flying. As he increased thrust, the plane banked to the right. And when it did this, he had to use even more force on the controls to bank back to the left. The plane was, in effect, ratcheting itself into a corner. Residents of Amsterdam could hear the jet struggling overhead and could see its curiously bare right-hand wing as it turned. It was still 13 kilometers from the airport, or about 8 miles.
Dude, that's
Before
actually
long,
fucking
the inevitable
crazy.
happened. The speed of the 747 had decayed so much that its control surfaces could no longer overcome the thrust asymmetry from the engines. The aircraft banked
Oh
sharply to the
god.
right. Its nose pitched violently down.
Oh no.
The aircraft had entered an aerodynamic stall, its wings no longer traveling fast enough to grab a hold of the air. The ground proximity warning system rang out in the cockpit, but it didn't tell the pilots anything they didn't already know. There was nothing the crew could do. At 30 minutes past 7, the massive aircraft slammed into an 11-story apartment
Holy
building 8
shit.
miles from the runway. Along with the 3
Oh.
crew members and their solitary passenger, 43 people on.
Oh. Oh. Oh man, dude, that's not how I wanted this to end. Oh god. Oh, this is stressing me out, dude. Especially because my mom and my sisters and my nephews are supposed to be going to Honduras in a couple of months, dude. Oh god. Holy
On the ground were also killed.
Jesus Christ.
As the smoke rose from the crash site, serious questions arose about how such a disaster could even happen in the first place. How could 2 engines simply fall off the wing? When investigators dredged the 2 missing engines up from the bottom of a lake, they uncovered something shocking. The pins which connected the engine pylons to the wing and to the engine had failed due to metal fatigue. Repeated stress and vibration over hundreds of flights had caused cracks to form, which slowly grew and then joined together as Flight 1862 departed Amsterdam. Incredibly, this wasn't news to Boeing, the aircraft's manufacturer. In the 15 months before the crash, 3 pylons on airplanes operated by China Airlines, El Al, and Evergreen had failed
Damn.
in flight, resulting in 2 fatal crashes and 1 serious accident. The US Federal Aviation Administration had issued numerous airworthiness directives about this defect, addressing multiple fatigue problems in the pylon structure, including fuse pins, lugs, and fittings. Nevertheless, new cracks and failures were discovered frequently, which cast a doubt over the ultimate strength of the structure. Ultimately, Boeing were forced to develop a stainless steel fuse pin. This new pin had a considerably improved fatigue and crack growth life. Thankfully, this improvement has made catastrophic failures such as this a thing of the past. This change came too late for the victims of Flight 1862, both in the air and on the ground. But it is a part of a long procession of safety improvements in commercial aviation, which continues to this day.
Holy shit. That's fucking crazy, bro. Oh man, dude. Alright, well, oh man, I don't even know. That made me so nervous right now. Alright, well, I hope you guys fucking enjoyed. Try to get more plane aviation videos out there. Oh man. Yeah, go like my man's video, Green Dot Aviation. Go like, subscribe. You know, while you're at it, go do that shit to me, you big weenie.